Julia came up to me far too close to me and said, "Come eat with me. There are sodas and iced tea." Julia and I talked about our classes, our day, and told me that we both had Friday evening off. She said, we could do something together Friday night if you want. The student union always has something going on, but we can drive somewhere and have dinner together. I really want to spend some time with you." Julia could tell that she made me nervous. So I said, "I've never been on a date." There was always something to do on the farm. I would go with a bunch of friends to the county fair for rides on the Midway and eating all the crazy food there, but there were a lot of us all together. Most of those girls are already married now. I just never did pick one. Julia was laughing. "That's funny. The way you say pick one is as if the men were always in charge and you selected a mate and they came running." I know that's not politically correct, but that's the way it is down in the country. Male-female chemistry is helped along by tradition and custom. Most of the kids in high school had already made that selection by the time we graduated. A few were going off to college, but most of them had already selected a life mate. I didn't because I've always felt there were more to choose from that I hadn't met, and I wanted to meet as many people as I could before I said I wouldn't look at another female and get excited. Julia smiled so sweetly and asked, "Do you get excited looking at me?" I laughed and said, "Now that's being forward, Julia. Of course, I get excited seeing you and will think of you later. How could I resist your piercing eyes and very voluptuous body?" "Yep." "You do a number on me, Julia. We better go back to work or I'll be on a knee proposing." We were both laughing as Julia's not voluptuous at all, but very slim. She had the decency to continue laughing and said, "That could be interesting." I spent the rest of the evening putting books on shelves. It looked like I was going to be constantly condensing groups of books through several stacks of shelves and bringing a new book to feature. All this required a sign. The first several weeks were fun, and I asked Julia on a Thursday if she wanted to go out to eat Friday evening. She blushed and said, I have to attend a family dinner at my grandmother's. I'd love to have you accompany me, but Dad might get a little upset. I'll approach him tonight to see what he thinks." "Scott Jr. is still in jail and hasn't been given bail yet. You won't have to tell anyone about the problem you had if Dad agrees to not bring it up. We were having supper. And I said, I didn't even think of the ramifications of us going out. We shouldn't be doing this and definitely not in front of your family." Flames came from Julia's eyes as she said, "I will do it when I have opportunity if I want to introduce my special friend to my grandmother. I'll not hide my feelings and will show off someone who I'm proud to know." I don't think I'll give Dad a choice. "We're going to Gamma's for Friday dinner. She's going to love you." "I hope you're right, Julia. What will be the appropriate apparel to wear for something like that?" She thought about it for a few minutes and said, "Wear a suit and tie this time. We'll go in jeans next time." I studied all day Friday and turned in a stack of completed homework for each of my classes. I think I surprised them all when I turned in a couple of months of tests and questionnaires for each class. I completed a book report complete with reference cards for English, with a synopsis of the subject for a future assignment to be written for that same class. The assignment requested her approval for the subject summary. I almost felt guilty about the math exams. They were so simple that I had to go back over each problem to ensure I hadn't overlooked anything. I turned in the entire semester's work. Dr. Grunder's son tossed the papers on his desk and said, "Couldn't you have given me these a little at a time?" "What will you do for the rest of the semester now?" "Easy. I'll work on next semester's material," I replied. I enjoy math, but I had to learn some new terminology for concepts I already knew by other names. I really liked calculus in high school, especially when I learned how to apply it to farming problems. The grumpy professor looked at me and said, "That's what people don't do anymore. They don't apply simple math to their everyday life. You just said you used your knowledge for farming, and I can understand how you would do that. You learned it and applied it. I hope I can teach my students to do the same." He shook his head and added, "Get out of here." I need to prepare for my next lecture. I spent 4 to 5 solid hours in the morning studying, had lunch, and then worked another 3 hours on assignments. I attended several lectures to clarify certain terms or concepts for my assignments. Working at the bookstore was supposed to be only 20 hours a week, but the manager wasn't rushing to hire more people since the store was running smoothly. Julia and I were having dinner in the back of the store when I brought up, "We're both working a lot more than 20 hours a week." We're working 16 hours on weekends and 18 hours during the week. We're barely keeping up with our studies, and this isn't what we signed up for. We went on a Friday night date and almost fell asleep while saying goodnight. How are we supposed to be wild and crazy college kids like this? Julia started laughing as she said, I was thinking the same thing. We've barely had time for anything, and I even bought a big box of things we might need, but we haven't had the chance to do much. I sighed. We just need to find a balance. Everything's been so hectic with work and school that it's hard to catch our breath. We shared a quiet moment, knowing we had more to look forward to once we found a way to relax and enjoy things more. For glasses appeared with amber liquid in them. Julia leaned over to me and said, "Be careful with that stuff." Grandmother has it brought up to her from somewhere down where you live. I wondered if it could be some of Granddad's best. It was Inquisition time as Aunt Jill and Grandmother really went to work on finding out about my family where I grew up, about my deceased parents and my grandparents. It took Grandmother a little bit to understand that my grandmother really was named Happy. I told her that Happy had the warmest smile she would ever see. My grandfather was someone special because he had taken my sister and me in and raised us. I proudly said, "I have been taught to be a good person by two good people." Then it was time to question Julia about our relationship. Grandmother asked, "You two haven't known each other that long. Are you rushing your relationship?" Julia smiled at her grandmother and said, "Now, don't tell me about rushing things. How many times have you told me the story of how you and grandfather met at a church dance and were at the altar within 2 weeks? We're not heading to the altar, but we're learning about each other." Julia's Aunt Jill had been fairly quiet, but then rather bluntly asked, "Have you two found out if you're compatible in bed?" I about fell off the couch. Grandmother didn't help when she said, "That's an important topic. That's why your grandfather and I were married so fast. We tried each other out and liked it." Julia was bright red and answered, "We've barely kissed. We haven't had time to go out on dates much. We spend all our spare time studying and working at the bookstore." Grandmother became alarmed and said, "That's wrong. Kids need some playtime. You two need to quit that job or get the hours reduced. How are you two ever going to have the time to just talk to each other, much less do some Hoff discovery?" I offered my excuse. I wasn't able to start school right out of high school, so I'm a year and a half behind the other kids my age. I want to make up those hours and be at the same level as the others from my area who are here. I think there are 2 from my graduating class who go to school here. I want to catch up. I went on with a comment about Julia's situation. Julia's dad doesn't give her an allowance or offer money, and says that she should earn what she spends. He feels he supplies the tuition, books, housing, and cafeteria, so she should be able to take care of herself. Granny was getting steamed. Jill huffed and puffed a little. Jill said, "Our folks did all that for us kids and still gave us plenty of spending money. Your dad's car dealership is selling a record number of cars and trucks, and I'm sure that he's not giving them away. I know he probably has to pay alimony to your mom, but she has money of her own. That skinflint should be as good as or better than our mom and dad." My goodness, just hearing how he's shortchanging you makes me mad. I wonder if he's had to pay off a bunch of girls Scott Jr. might have been fooling with. I hear Scotty's been in some new kind of trouble every time I turn around. I heard he was kicked out of school for fighting and may not be able to get back in this time. Him being the BMOC as the football quarterback of the future isn't going to help him if he doesn't have a school to go to. Grandmother said, "I didn't hear about this one. I'll have to call someone to find out the details." Julia said, "Don't bother. Gamma Bernie knows about it firsthand." Scott and Bernie were assigned as roommates, and Scott got mad for being assigned a roommate and attacked Bernie. The police came and tricked Bernie into going back to the police station, where they locked him in a holding cell and robbed him. Meanwhile, Scotty destroyed all of Bernie's clothes, personal stuff, and books. Scott tried to attack Bernie in front of the chief of police when Bernie was let out of jail. Jill asked, "How bad did he hurt you?" "He's a hell of a lot bigger than you are." Julia said, "I heard all about it. Bernie just defended himself and kept pushing Scott away. Scott has a broken clavicle, a broken nose, and lost a tooth. Bernie kept pushing Scott away from him and avoiding his rushes. He didn't never hit Scott, just pushed him." Bernie didn't even get a bruise. Grandmother was squinting and said, I wonder why that wasn't on the TV news or in the newspaper. Scott Sr. must be running around keeping everything quiet. Now listen here, Bernie. Scott has plenty of money, so make him give you some of it. I'm not talking about replacing your stuff, but money enough for you to enjoy life while you're learning. What are you going to school to become? I smiled and told the woman, I want to be a lawyer and practice law back home. There is only one lawyer in town, and he's talking about retiring. Our county state's attorney probably should retire too and has mentioned it to me. So there is a built-in practice for me down there. I always wanted to learn the law. Grandmother leaned back in her chair and put her forearm over her forehead. I was getting worried, but she sat up and asked, Julia, you didn't tell him, did you? Julia smiled and said, No, I wanted you to tell him. Mrs. McKinley was smiling at me when she said, My George went to law school in Boston. We'll look up all his stuff one of these days. He came back here to practice law and was unbelievably successful. He started out in good shape because his parents had money. My parents were also very well off. Well, George won a couple of enormous court cases that are still paying his estate. We made sure our only son, Scott Sr.'s dad, was spoiled and helped him go into the car business. He was super successful with the dealership and raised Scott Sr. to be a good automobile man. Scott Jr. wants to do that too, but was going to wait until after his professional football career. He might be in jail for a while if he tried to kill you in front of the police chief. The little white-haired woman said, So, you see, I find it sweet that my great-granddaughter, who shares my name, has met a man who wants to be a lawyer. You're not mouthy enough to be a lawyer. You better learn to be more vocal. Jill said, You have your grandparents' gift that I know you haven't touched. Julia, you would be welcome to it if you wanted to use some of my cash. Your dad could put you on the books at the dealership, and you could make a commercial a month and probably make more than what you do at the bookstore. Julia said, But that's when Bernie and I get to see each other and chat a little. We've been eating breakfast together lately, but Bernie needs the job. I looked at Julia and said, I actually don't. I had a lot saved up and it's in the bank up here. I should have enough to get through law school without working, but I enjoy the work and the time I have with Julia. Grandmother said, I want you to get a young lawyer and sue Scott because Scott Jr. might still be a part of Scott Sr.'s family responsibility. You can sue Scott Jr. and he would have to use his trust fund money that could pay you. You don't have to go crazy, but you could get some money pretty fast that would carry you through school. Julia can do the same with her trusts. This family isn't paupers. We all have money, so Julia can do as she pleases if she wants to be a sugar mama. Jill said, You could be one of those cougars and hire him to be your pool boy, grandmother. The older woman laughed and said, I don't have a pool, so I'd have to use him for something else. Do I have to watch out to make sure you don't steal my guy before he's even officially mine? Julia was laughing as she said this. I said to Julia, I'm having a great time, but I have to get up early tomorrow to have breakfast and do some studying before work. I'd sure like my breakfast and study to be with my work partner. We don't go in until noon so we can get some studying in. This headstrong possible girlfriend said, You could invite me to stay over with you. Your dorm allows that, the same as mine. It's just not convenient to use the bathroom. Julia's hand went to her face and it turned red. You have the room next to the resident, so you have your own bathroom. You dog. I'll just pack a bag and we'll break the box of toys open. Grandmother said, Oh boy. My little Julia is making some adult plans. Do Jill and I need to give you the talk, or do you two think you can figure out how to do it? I was blushing now, but Julia grabbed my hand and softly said to me, You'll have to invite me or I'd think I was being too pushy. Jill began laughing. You can be as pushy as you want when you have your guy in your sights. I'm so excited for you, Julia, and I just know that you're going to enjoy finding out about each other. I gave you that Kama Sutra for modern girls as your welcome to college life. Make sure you pack that to go visit. Now, I need to go home and ravage my guy. I'll probably have to wake him up. We all stood up at the same time. Jill hugged Julia, then turned to me and gave me a hug. She said, George has been falling asleep earlier lately if she doesn't use you up. Julia and grandmother hugged, and the white-haired lady then pulled my coat sleeve so that I would approach her. She gave me a sweet hug and a kiss on the cheek. She smiled at me while still holding onto my arm. I might have to consider that pool boy thing. We all laughed while we went toward the front door. Her man handed me Julia's coat and let me help her into it. He then held my good leather dress coat up for me to slide on. I helped Julia into my pickup truck and thought that it had probably looked strange in the driveway. Jill's car was a Chevrolet Impala, which wasn't a show-off car. She might have a fancier car, but they drove the Impala here tonight. I let the truck run a few minutes to let the oil circulate. This cold weather can be hard on an engine. This was only a 6-cylinder, and I didn't want to abuse it. We drove to the student parking lot, and I walked Julia to her dorm. I told her, "How about we meet for breakfast about 7 or 8? You decide, let's sleep in a while and meet at 8 o'clock in the morning. I'll meet you at the cafeteria, or you can come by to walk me there. I'll bring my books and we can study there or go back to my dorm." Sounds good. I gathered this woman into my arms and kissed her better than we had kissed before. Our energy was racing out of control by the time the kiss ended. Julia held me close and told me, "I hope you felt all the things happening to me and us during that kiss. It's enough to scare us." I softly said, "You best go in or we're going to want more than we should have right now. We still have some getting to know each other before I begin proposing." We kissed once more, and I watched as she went to the open elevator and disappeared. The floor residence door had a "Do Not Disturb" sign hung on it. I needed one of those. I wondered if there might be one on the closet shelf. There was one in the other room. I let myself in and was quiet as I undressed and hung my clothes up. I checked the high shelf, and there was the plastic sign that could be hung on the doorknob. We would need that if Julia does come. I turned the radio onto my nightly jazz encounter and lay in bed, thinking about how crazy it is for me to be so enthusiastic about a girl. Sure, I had crushes on one girl or another as I grew up, but the closest I came to being sweet on a girl was when I sat in the same bus seat with a local girl. We were pretty relaxed with each other and chatted for a couple of months before she began sitting with the other girls. I went back to sitting with the guys or my sister. I owed my family a letter, and it nagged at me long enough that I got up and got a piece of printer paper out and wrote a letter of my progress. I told them about being able to get a nice suit at the Salvation Army store, and that I was working part-time at the campus bookstore. I finished the letter telling about meeting a girl that was very sweet. I included I had gone to a dinner party at her great-grandmother's home. I told the family that I missed them and would try to schedule a weekend off from the bookstore so that I could come see them. I'd bet Sis's 2 kids were getting really big. I gave it a love. Bernie folded the paper and put it in an envelope. I wrote out the address and return address and put pants and shoes on, rode the elevator down, bought a stamp from the machine, and dropped the envelope in the box. That was a chore that needed to be done. I undressed again and lay in bed thinking about Julia. Was it too soon for us to be thinking about sex, to be thinking about some kind of permanent relationship? This boy-girl stuff is confusing. My motor was winding down and I was almost gone. What was that? I heard more female noises and then a steady banging from something. I almost fell out of bed. That was the resident doing the bumpity-bump. The bed was rickety enough to rock into the wall, and the female voice was the recipient of the resident's efforts. The wails became louder as the bumps became firmer. This babe could make some noise. I heard what was almost a scream and a very loud groan. And then the banging noise stopped. Well, that was fun. I lay still trying to hear what they were saying. But they were talking softly, and my jazz station covered the rest. I heard the toilet flush, and then the bed groaning, as they must have gone back to bed. There was a scraping sound, so he must have pulled the bed away from the wall so that he wouldn't be banging on it next time. I looked at my watch and saw that it was almost midnight. That did it. I went right to sleep. I woke up with a start and looked at my watch. I didn't oversleep. It was only 6:30. I didn't have to get up right then, but something dinged in my head and I sat up. I needed to change the sheets and pillowcase and maybe get another pillow. I should probably get another sheet set and some more towels. I really needed an alarm clock, so I should run to Walmart. The shower had me wide awake and ready for the day. I took my cash from my hiding place and separated $100. I changed my mind and took $200 out. I shouldn't need that much, but maybe. I put my old coat on and was out to my truck all in less than 20 minutes. I didn't let the truck warm up that much, but I didn't rev the engine and slowly drove to Walmart. I went back to appliances and found a good alarm clock. Next was housewares, where I pulled another sheet set, another pillow, 2 extra pillowcases, 2 bigger bath towels, and some washcloths. All the sewing stuff was next to that. I went to the display that had a variety of everything one would need. I picked out this wheel that would open over some buttons. The thing was filled with all sizes of shirt buttons and all the colors of the rainbow. On that same display was a kit that contained everything someone would need to sew a button on or sew up a small area that might have pulled apart. It even had a thimble. I was pushing the cart toward the registers when I saw some women's long, fluffy robes that looked warm and great for lounging around in. I hate sizes, but these weren't too bad. I chose a medium. I went to the pharmacy area to be on the safe side and found the condoms. I chose a big box and also found the KY jelly. I had heard all the complaints about first times and how difficult it was to properly slide in. I thought that I would be embarrassed when the lady checked me out, but she just scanned the items, took my money, and I was out of there. I did forget some shampoo, but Julia would have to direct me on that. I pulled the old sheets off and took a laundry basket down to the laundromat, with the sheets, pillowcases, and my towels. Everything fit in one of the big washers. I didn't wash the robe because I didn't think I would need to. I took a chance because it was Saturday morning and ran back up to my room to put fresh sheets on, and I put 2 fresh towels and 2 washcloths out. I ran back downstairs, put the washed items into a dryer, fed some tokens in, and ran back upstairs. I straightened out the closet and dusted the room. The bathroom wasn't messy and there were no water spots on the tub walls. I looked around the room and it looked good. I went down to the laundry building and waited for the clothes dryer to be done. I quickly had everything out and folded and carried it upstairs. The gold color blankets looked as nice as a spread, but the 2 side-by-side pillows looked a little funny. I put the condoms and KY in the drawer of the bedside table. Looking around, I thought I was ready for an intimate visitor. I felt my face, and it wasn't even a little prickly, so I didn't need to shave again. I grabbed my new math book and went to Julia's dorm next door. My watch showed that it was just before 8. The elevator door opened, and the woman of my life stepped out. She almost ran to me, and we hugged. She said, "I'm hungry, and we have a lot to talk about." We were sitting at a table with a pile of pancakes, coffee, milk, and a couple of scrambled eggs. You could get seconds, but I like to get everything at once. Both of us ate ravenously, making me wonder why we would be so hungry after the great food we had last night. We sat back with a warmed-up cup of coffee when we finished. Julia said, "I was nuts last night thinking about everything with us and about school. You know that I took that job for the money and for the opportunity to meet people and maybe a guy. I did all that and then thought of how silly it was for me to be sitting on a real fortune in my trust from my grandparents, my great-grandmother, and the trust my mom insisted Dad set up for Scott and me individually. I don't have any idea how much all that is. And I don't care because it's there for some future happening and not to be frivolous with. Scott's running through his money pretty fast and you're going to help him spend some more. You need to calculate what you will need through law school and then figure what the bookstore would pay you while you work 20 hours a week. There will be a number that will be what you will want to get from Scott. Remember that you have to give the attorney you hire about a third. So add that in. I'm sure that Scott will elect to settle without going to court. I'm sure Dad will tell him to do that and will help him if he needs it." She looked me in the eye and said, "You obviously have a few dollars that you've put away, and you received some from Dad to replace your clothes and books. I think we should give our notice at the bookstore and use the time we were working to study and get further ahead. Get as many credit hours as possible while you have all these department heads working with you. It's not like you're paying for the hours since you're on a full scholarship. With you being successful with the program and our association, I might talk them into letting me do the same, and the 2 of us can really rocket ahead. We might be overdoing it, but if anything, we were doing that with a part-time job." I warmed our coffee up again and sat back down. "Okay, so the plan is to give 2 weeks' notice today, hire an attorney for me, you negotiate with the department heads to work ahead, and then we'll see how we can plan on spending more free time with each other." Julia said, "I thought about us last night. I have been pushing you, but I want to know about all those intimate things, and you're the one I want to learn them with. We're both lost sheep between the sheets. We need spring break to spend some continuous time together, to see how well we still like each other after spending that time together. That's over a month from now. You know that we can get that much farther ahead if we go to summer school. I'm thinking we can do that as well. I looked up at Julia. I feel guilty about leaving the bookstore. I've only worked there just over a month. I was able to get the discount on all my second semester books, which amounted to over $100. I think Mrs. Harrison comes in on Saturday morning and is gone by 10. Let's go over there now to see if she's there and talk to her. We both slung our backpacks over our shoulders and headed toward the bookstore. It was just opening and Mrs. Harrison was checking the registers. She looked up and asked, "Did you two do anything special on your night off?" Julia answered for us and said, "We went to dinner at my grandmother's." I was able to introduce Bernie to some of my family. Mrs. Harrison said, "Well, you do come from an old family here in Kalaya. Why are you two in so early?" I spoke this time and said, "We need to talk. Both of us may need to give her notice. Can we use your office or the break room?" She said, "Let's use the break room." I put coffee on and it should be done. Julia and I didn't want any coffee, but we sat with Mrs. Harrison. I began. "I'm still very appreciative that you gave me the job. It was to give me a few dollars spending money and help me meet people. I'm trying to do an accelerated program that will get me ahead about a year and a half. As you know, I have a full scholarship, so I'm not shortchanging myself on tuition. You were pretty specific that the most I would work would be about 20 hours a week when you hired me. We're both working 34 hours a week with 4 days of 4.5 hours and the 2 weekend days. That's 14 additional hours plus travel time that we could use studying." Julia continued on and said, "My grandmother convinced me to use some of my trust for extra money as I need it. I don't do anything extravagant or frivolous, but I might go somewhere for spring break this year. I really think I should leave, but you may be able to convince Bernie to stay." The boss directly asked me, "Do you have trusts or cash stashed?" "No, ma'am. I do have some savings, and I'll probably get some extra money from a lawsuit that's coming up. I need even less than Julia to live on, so I actually have what I need through law school. Our farm doesn't make any big money, but they know how to save what they do bring in. My dad's life insurance policies will carry me through the way he planned it." The lady said, "I didn't realize that I was putting that much of a burden on you until Grunderson and Morgan asked me if I was trying to kill you for Scott McKinley Jr. I was going to speak to you and didn't realize that I had Julio working parallel with you. You two make such a sweet couple, and I hope you make it together. I see hope in our country's future when I see young people like you. Can we do this? Both of you work this weekend and Monday for me. I'll get some of the applicants who have piled up to come in for interviews and find out what hours they can and want to work. Your last day will be Monday, Julia, and we'll have to see about Bernie. I can tell you, though, that I will not ask him to work the weekend again after working 4 nights. Julia and I looked at each other and I said, "Try to find my replacement. I need the time to study, sleep, and to talk to someone who might be my future life partner." Mrs. Harrison said, "I'll go start calling applicants in. There are a few who worked in the bookstore before and left because of scheduling conflicts. I'll start with them. They might be able to give me answers today." Julia asked me what I wanted to do, and I said, "It's almost 10 o'clock, so let's stay here and study. We'd waste too much time going back to the dorms and then coming back here. We can use the 2 hours more productively by staying right here." Mrs. Harrison had paused at the door to see what we were going to do, and I think we surprised her that we didn't want to waste any time to travel back and forth to the dorms. I saw her smile as she headed to her office. I was able to get through the first half of the trigonometry class text. It would take the second reading and the end of chapter tests before I could attack the problem sheets Grunderson had created. I didn't think I would have any problem with this semester. I put my book back in my backpack and went to the bathroom at close to noon. Julia slowly stood and said, "I didn't get enough sleep last night, and we'll have to suck up some caffeine to get going. We, or at least I, have to quit worrying about so much. You'll make it work out." I told Julia when she came back from the bathroom, "Let's go outside, no coats, and jog around the building. That will wake both of us up. We're making the right decision to get out of this." Julia went to the front where she managed the registers, as well as questions from customers. I reset an entire section to accommodate a book for a new class. We would have a high demand on the book because it's the first semester it'll be used. Mrs. Harrison came from her office about 6 o'clock and introduced us to 4 girls who used to work in the bookstore. We chatted for a few minutes before the 4 left. Julia and I were told, "You don't have to come in tomorrow or from now on." Those 4 all wanted and needed their jobs back. Both of you listen to me. Call me if you ever want or need to come back for part-time employment. I'll find room for you. You two have been the best employees I've ever had. I'm going to have the assistant manager close at 7. There hasn't been a customer in the store since 5 or 5:30. That made everyone happy and we hugged all the folks and walked back to our dorms at 7. Julia asked, "Can you wait for me to shower before I come over?" "The only thing I don't have is your shampoo. Bring your shampoo and clothes for church tomorrow." I gave her a quick hug and then laughed before saying, "Come to my web," said the spider to the fly. "Really? We're going to church together." "Which one? Where? What denomination?" I smiled at Julia and honestly answered, "I have no idea." Julia was impressed that my room was neatly organized and clean. She sat on the bed and patted the twin pillows. She looked at me and said, "This is very nice, Bernie. Let's take a shower so that we're both clean to inspect all the parts we don't know much about. I've seen boys before, and I know that you've seen girls, but I'll bet you're like me and haven't really had the opportunity to look at what everything looks like up close. Let's do it together so that we can touch each other." This is almost too exciting. I remembered the sign on the shelf and hung it on the door or knob to avoid any interruptions. Julia was already heading toward the bathtub, and I followed, setting my things aside. We stepped into the shower together, letting the cold water wake us up before it warmed. Wrapped in each other's arms, we shared a quiet moment. Julia looked up and smiled. "I'll call grandmother and find out what church she goes to. I haven't been in years. She'd love to come with us." Her words surprised me, but they felt natural. "You're something special, Bernie," she added softly. "It feels like we've known each other forever." Oddly enough, I felt the same way as the steam rose around us. I handed her a washcloth and gently helped her rinse off the soap. We laughed and exchanged a few small kisses, the warmth between us growing more emotional than physical. The comfort of simply being close, of caring for one another, filled the room. After drying off, I handed Julia a fluffy robe and got dressed. She used the hallway phone to call her grandmother. "Hi, Gamma." "No, we haven't done anything crazy," she said, blushing. "We just took a shower together. We want to go to church with you tomorrow. Bernie's driving." She hung up and smiled. She's happy. She'll meet us at 9:30. The dorm was quiet. As we returned to the room, I made sure the Do Not Disturb sign was hanging properly and we dimmed the lights to settle down. Julia wrapped herself in the blanket beside me. We lay close, exchanging quiet stories from childhood about siblings who used to sneak into our beds during storms or nightmares looking for comfort. Julia yawned. "Let's just hold each other tonight," she whispered. "It feels good to be safe like this." We drifted off to sleep, wrapped in a quiet understanding and something that felt like the early stirrings of love. Breakfast was special that morning. The kitchen had prepared French toast from thick slices of bread, soaked in a sweet egg mixture and lightly crisped. Served with melted butter and just a touch of maple syrup. They were perfect. I added a couple of over-easy eggs, some juice, milk, and coffee. As we sat finishing our coffee, Julia said, "I was thinking maybe we should just stay in student housing. With food like this and a comfortable space, why waste money on an off-campus apartment we might not even like as much? You've got your room. We have hot water, good heat, and a quiet place to study." She gave me a playful look. "I'll still come by and help you fall asleep." Am I being too pushy again? I almost said it last night, and now I want to shout it in this half-full cafeteria. I laughed and replied, "I get what you mean. Let's see how we feel after a few weeks of being around each other so much. Just thinking about the future has my stomach doing flips. You're my first real relationship, Julia, so you kind of have to be my first love. But we're still young, and committing this early is a big deal. Still, we've grown comfortable with each other really quickly." Julia added, "This isn't just some casual thing, it's real. We're going to church with my grandmother today. She probably already suspects something's up. And if my luck holds, Aunt Jill will be there too with her usual nosy questions. Be ready. Those two have been asking me when I'd find someone special for years. And now you've become that someone. I sat quietly watching Julia. She had a kind of natural charm, soft flowing hair, kind eyes, and a smile that always hinted at mischief. She carried herself with quiet confidence, and I found myself wanting to learn more about her with every passing moment. We were waiting on the curb when her grandmother pulled up. We climbed into the car, glad to escape the cold February wind. Julia hugged my arm and smiled at her grandmother, who said, "We'll swing by and pick up Jill. She usually comes to church with me." As soon as Jill got in, she turned to Julia and gave her a knowing look. I can tell something's different. You've got that look. Grandmother McKinley rolled her eyes. Let's just get to church first, shall we? Jill grinned and leaned over to me. I better hear she's happy. That's all I care about. It was hard not to laugh at Jill's dramatic flair. The church service was warm and welcoming. I was introduced to dozens of people, many of whom I hoped would reintroduce themselves, so I could learn all their names. Afterward, we headed to what turned out to be one of the finest brunch spots in town. Julia's grandmother, clearly well known, was treated like a VIP. We were seated on a raised section of the dining room, and the staff were attentive and kind. I helped the ladies through the buffet, where we were offered a variety of dishes: seafood, chicken, beef, and more. I started with prime rib and eggs, then returned for more, including a lobster tail. The others watched with amused expressions as I loaded up my plate, clearly surprised at my appetite. Julia leaned over and whispered with a smile, "Now we're getting to the best part, the reason we all come here. I know I'm going to love it, and I think you will too." We were brought a tray of various cakes with a stack of ice cream in the middle covered with chocolate syrup and crushed nuts. There was some different kinds of syrup mixed in along with tiny flecks of peppermint leaves to enhance all the flavors. It was excellent. Grandmother had her man drive us back to her home, and we were seated in the sitting room at first. A maid brought out small glasses and a large earthen jug and began pouring generous portions into each. The senior Mrs. McKinley picked her glass up and motioned for us to do the same. She said, "I've always regretted that Thomas didn't stay with me long, but he did give me my children. We weren't supposed to be mates, but it couldn't be helped. We were the closest that cousins could be, and we remained that way. Have a sip for my lost lover, knowing I will honor him for all my days." I sipped the delicious corn liquor that was mixed and fermented with other grains the same as Granddad did. I watched as Julia sipped and closed her eyes to enjoy the blast on her taste buds. Jill did the same, and Grandmother sipped, smiled, and then closed her eyes in a smile. Jill said, "Grandmother said that you two had both resigned from your bookstore job. What are you going to do with all that spare time?" Julia looked up with her impish grin and said, "We're planning on experimenting with all the various positions in the book you gave me. We've only tried a couple, so we have many days and nights to try the rest." Jill was shocked, but Grandmother burst out laughing. "Oh, Julia, you are often so much more than your mother could and can handle. She's out traveling the world, shopping for someone to take Scott's place. You make me proud to be your grandparent." Jill said, "You're the perfect person to carry on the traditions and quirks of our family. Come read the words of your aunts, mothers, grandmothers, and great-grandmothers. Our family has always been full of strong women who loved and protected their man, and I know you will do the same. God bless both of you." Grandmother held on to Julia as she went through a moment of missing her mother and grandparents. I felt this was a special moment, so I leaned back and smiled at Jill. She almost leapt across the space, sitting on my lap and hugging me, her head resting on my shoulder. I simply held her, letting her find comfort until Julia and Mrs. McKinley were ready to speak. Julia raised an eyebrow and teased, "Are you trying to see if my man will fall for your charm, Jill? You've always been my favorite aunt, but now you want to share him?" Jill burst into laughter and almost toppled off my lap. She kissed me, then playfully launched herself at Julia, where the two embraced, laughing together until Grandmother gave a sharp whistle to get their attention. "George and James used to love watching you two go at it," she said with a smirk. "But this is not the time or place for that. Take your man home and talk to us tomorrow, Julia. We slipped into our heavy coats and made our way to the car that would take us back to the dorm. Once we were in my room, Julia said, I need to get ready for school tomorrow, so we should say goodnight. Thank you for being a part of my family today. I haven't seen my grandmother so happy in years. I hope we can visit your family with the same warmth and closeness. We will love. My people are simple and ready to enjoy knowing others our family enjoys. I hope it's soon. It was still early, so I changed sheets and tossed the towels into the laundry basket, along with the white shirt I had worn. I set it aside because I could do it while I studied in the morning. I had made up a list of assignments for my first and second semesters and entered them into an Excel spreadsheet so that I could check off what weeks were complete in each course. It wasn't spring break yet, and I was over halfway through my second semester classes. I should have a direction by when I wanted to begin my third semester. I needed to choose my classes so I would have a specific course of study toward a degree that would assist me getting into law school. A high score on the LSAT would be good, but an overall good GPA would be equally as good. I thought about this a while until I finally decided to go see Jonathan Morgan in the morning. Dear listeners, next part of this story will be released soon. Please share your thoughts in the comments section below, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.